Dorje chanchen dele naroda mami da bopa duji tengu kadin sunden savela mesha sagyula mayidam chogyula sovader sodagi jenje lo. Kebrengi dome zamlingen tape donsung yung la kya zome kya wadu je chang pa je den gumbo shabla du du tatu samgyo kyole me jenje lo shi tu je jen. Ninge mumpa sane kyan sendo de du dobra jenje lo. Good morning, and so now we continue to the next part, the completion stage practice. In this particular collection, there are quite a few teachings focused on what's here called completion stage. Completion stage, again, is the particular vocabulary of the secret mantra tradition. Completion stage being the second stage that is necessary when training with deity yoga. In this collection, where this topic is taught, it's often called Mahamudra. But here, coming right after that last teaching on the creation stage, here the completion stage instructions are actually quite bare, rather brief. So the teachings that I gave in Querétaro is another teaching from this collection. That one is called Recognizing Ordinary Consciousness. That one has, for example, more details regarding completion stage. But even in that set of teachings, it is mostly focused on helping you identify what is this ordinary consciousness. I talked about this yesterday, which is also a synonym for an unusual synonym. Gampopa chose this unusual synonym for what is otherwise, in a more fancy way called like Dharmakaya, Buddha nature, Rigpa, co-emergent wisdom. So that was the set of teachings in Querétaro. But if you really want to know more on this topic, although knowing too much is not useful, it's all just concepts. If you want to know a little bit more about this topic, then particularly I think the evening teachings on Tuesday and Wednesday in Monterrey, called the co-emergent Mahamudra with the two armors. That set of teachings has a lot more on this topic of Mahamudra, which here is called completion stage. So mainly, Gampopa taught the practice of Mahamudra. Gampopa used this Mahamudra as the kind of overarching system, overarching kind of context for understanding everything else. So when I say that he mostly taught Mahamudra, I don't mean that he said, I'm going to teach Mahamudra, I'm not going to teach all the other things. No, what I mean is that all the other things are placed, put into their places within his way of teaching based on Mahamudra as the overall kind of context, the overall like umbrella to include everything else, including deity yoga. And so then all the other aspects of the Buddha's teachings such as things that we may classify under lesser vehicle, things that we classify under greater vehicle, or they are classified as paramita or secret mantra. All these other practices, Gampopa continued to use them, but I would say that he used them based on Mahamudra as the final kind of reference point. So even the way he teaches deity yoga as the quintessential secret mantra practice, it has the Mahamudra flavor. It has the Mahamudra approach. In fact, his approach in his lifetime, we have, historical records telling us that when he started to teach this way, many people started to notice that, oh, he is approaching these various topics in a different way. And many of them at first were skeptical. Then when they came and they listened to him, and then when they trained with him, and then when they can see his realization, his powers, they started to have a different opinion. And eventually many of them became his disciples. And there were others who did not become his disciples, continued to not agree with him. And then later, they even wrote, things. Some of them are very scholarly. They can quote many, many different texts to say, Gampopa's way is wrong. So like I said yesterday, don't get me wrong. First, the different lineages did not become different because they argued with each other. Actually, no. The different lineages became different simply because of geographic and individual style differences. But nonetheless, they actively disagreed when there is things to disagree. And they did not just pretend, oh, yeah, I agree with you. No. And so the disagreeing, and we should say disagreeing based on principles, was respected and even expected. So there were people who disagreed with Gampopa, particularly some of the great scholars of the Sakyapa tradition. And they disagreed with Gampopa's way of, explaining, especially Gampopa's way of explaining secret mantra. To them, it's too simplistic, not sophisticated enough. Another interesting thing regarding Gampopa and then Gampopa's teachers. So one story. So remember, there was one name I mentioned. This person called that people call Pamodrupa. So Pamodrupa was one of Gampopa's most important disciples. So before he became a disciple of Gampopa, he was already a very well-known, accomplished, well-respected scholar practitioner of the Sakyapa tradition. He was born in eastern Tibet, then traveled to central Tibet and met his teachers and received his training. During that time, many cases like that. These individuals who were born in eastern Tibet eventually traveled to central Tibet, received their main training, became famous, became well-known. Sometimes they stay in central Tibet, or they go to western Tibet, or they go back to eastern Tibet. In Pamodrupa's case, he stayed in central Tibet. Now, his brother, for example, his actual biological brother, came to central Tibet, trained, and in the brother's case, he trained with the Nyingmapas. And then he went back to Eastern Tibet and he started a monastery that to this day is one of the 6 main monasteries of the Nyingma tradition. The Kato lineage, Kato monastery in Eastern Tibet, right, was founded by Gampopa's, Pamudrupa's brother. And you can see, like for example, these 2 brothers, there isn't a sense, oh no, you should really be following my tradition. And at that time, it's really like, what tradition you choose, is based on individual, there's no sectarianism in a sense. Again, doesn't mean people did not disagree. People disagree, people have their own opinions. But there is no like sectarianism in the way that later, that became an issue. And because of that issue, now you have this expression, non-sectarian. You only keep talking about non-sectarian only if there are sectarians. So anyway, Pamodrupa, like many others in his time, started to hear about Gampopa and Gampopa's growing community. Then he heard about what Gampopa was teaching and how Gampopa would teach Mahamudra. And then he felt like, that's wrong. That's just kind of oversimplifying things. And then he thought, I'm going to go set him straight. So I'm going to go visit and debate him, to correct his wrong understanding. And clearly he has not read enough books. He doesn't know, all this theory, not educated enough. So he decided to go to where Gampopa was. At that time, again, like I said, Pamodrupa was already considered one of the key figures in the Sakyapa lineage. Although he's not, he was one of the key masters of the Sakyapa lineage. In fact, he wrote texts of the system most associated with the Sakyapa. Is called the Lamdre system, the path and its result. That's the main system of the Sakyapas, the path and its results, Lamdre. And Pamodrupa composed Lamdre texts, text that to this day is used in the Sakyapa. So he was a Lamdre master. And in order to practice, like Lamdre, you have to be very educated, but not just theory. Don't misunderstand. There's a lot of meditation. There's a lot of retreats as well. So he was truly like a scholar, practitioner, completely integrated, and a great like teacher. So he came to Gampopa. He said that when he arrived, Gampopa was eating lunch. So Gampopa kind of ignored him. And Gampopa knew, this is some famous guy who has arrived, News came, he just ate, kind of ignored Pamodrupa. Now, Gampopa wasn't uneducated. But he was educated differently. So first he had, years of training as a Kadampa monk. So they study texts, and also emphasis on retreat and practice. Yeah. And as I said, it's a misunderstanding to think the Kadampas did not practice secret mantra. They had secret mantra practice, and particularly Gampopa already was practicing very well Jakasamvara within the Kadampa tradition. And moreover, Gampopa was, before he became a monk, he was already trained as a medical doctor. His lineage of medical knowledge continues to today. In fact, one of his names is Dakpo Larje, which means Dakpo, again, where he came from, where he settled, rather. Dakpo. Larje means like the divine physician, the divine doctor of Dakpo. So anyway, as I said, Gampopa just ate. Then finally, he looked up and he said, "Oh, who are you?" Asked Pamodrupa. Then Pamodrupa said, "I'm so and so." And Gampopa said, "Oh yeah, I've heard of you." So he asked Pamodrupa, like, "So what have you been learning? What have you been practicing?" So then Pamodrupa explained, his training. And Gampopa said, "Okay, good, good." And then Gampopa said, "And what results have you gained?" Then Pamodrupa said, my teacher said that I have achieved the first bhumi of the Bodhisattva, 10 bhumis, that he has achieved the first bhumi, which is a big thing, a major achievement, a major, result. So Gampopa was continuing to eat, and so the basic food that Tibetans eat is tsampa. You could say, so it's roasted barley flour, but it functions almost like rice, So he's holding up a piece of the tsampa, and he looked at Pamodrupa, and Pamodrupa said, my teacher said I'm at the first bhumi. And then Gampopa, holding this piece of tsampa he's about to eat, and he said, compared to your first bhumi, my tsampa has more qualities. And then he ate his tsampa, that really shocked Pamodrupa. Of course, I'm sure if I said that to Pamodrupa, he will not be shocked,
Claro que
It's like, you useless, big talker, It was because it was Gampopa. Even though he was there to challenge Gampopa, but those words, when Gampopa said it, you could say the way he said it, right? It really hit Pamodrupa, like he's like completely like shocked, like don't know what to say, And so, anyway, long story short, Pamodrupa never went back. He stayed in Dakpo and became one of Gampopa's most important students. It's said from, in fact, if you count Gampopa's immediate successors, Pamodrupa was most influential. Because from Pamodrupa, you can trace 8 lineages. Pamodrupa had many very impressive students. So Drigong Kagyu is one of the lineages of these 8. Another very influential disciple of Gampopa is, of course, the first Karmapa, Dusung Khenpa. Dusung Khenpa also came from Eastern Tibet. He was the one who was nomadic, that would set up camp and went all over Tibet like that, So anyway, Gampopa used the framework or the reference point of Mahamudra, and from there, he freely used the different teachings, different techniques, different practices in order to kind of bring about the realization of Mahamudra in disciples. And for that purpose, he taught disciples kind of different things. It was very kind of personalized in a way. He didn't create like a big system where everybody, followed this one system. He could directly kind of speak to each student's needs. And in that way, he trained many, many of his students. He was, I think by our standards, also kind of unusual. Like now, like we all kind of think, a Vajrayana teacher, one of the things that a Vajrayana teacher needs to be able to do and willing to do and do on a regular basis is, of course, the performance of these empowerment rituals. But you read in Pamodrupa's life, often, some student will come and say, I would like you to guide me in this secret mantra practice or that secret mantra practice. And he will say, okay, have you received empowerment or not? And if they say, yes, I have, then he say, okay, then I can instruct you. And then when they say, no, I have not, then he said, oh, here, I heard 2 valleys away. This Lama is someone who gives empowerment. You go there, take the empowerment, then come back, and I'll teach you. So he didn't seem to, give empowerments much. And there are some places that says he gave empowerment. Then if you look at his collected teachings, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in his collected teachings, there's only one empowerment text for Vajrayogini. It seems like he didn't care much about giving empowerment, or at least the ritual, He wasn't that interested. In fact, his Vajrayogini empowerment text, also a little unusual. Seems to be very brief, kind of simplified. We have like some writings, maybe 50 years after Gampopa's time. But these writings are not friendly writings. This is pointing out the mistakes of Gampopa. And in one of them, this person wrote, and said, he doesn't know anything. He doesn't even know proper way to give empowerments. And then at first, he sent people who needed empowerments to other lamas to receive empowerments. And then when these disciples go receive empowerments from other lamas, and they didn't come back, then he realized he has a problem. So then he made up his own Vajrayogini empowerment text and gave that as empowerment because he was losing disciples to other lamas, according to this. You can see, people are not afraid to kind of say things and write things, So anyway, right? He was unusual. But he could do things that, would really impress people. Especially people who are looking for like, superficial signs of power. So one of the things apparently people saw him doing is he would wash his robes, and then he has to hang his robes to dry, right? It said that he, on more than one occasion, he would hang his robe on a ray of sunlight, like came into like his room, then he'll hang it on that. Jedi mind tricks. Also, it said that he has the ability to cause like the river to flow the other way. I'm not sure how happy the fish is, but anyway, it impressed the human beings who saw that. I saw on Facebook one of the comedians, talking about how Moses was so inconsiderate of the creatures in the ocean when he parted the ocean, He said, can you imagine the shock for the fish? Yeah, sure, you save a bunch of people, but and the environmental impact of doing that. People complain about everything. Those were simpler times, you know. You don't have to think about ecological impact, social impact. Anyway, yeah, so if you look at Gampopa's collected teachings, you know, another thing you'll notice is very little ritual, almost non-existent, very minimal rituals. So Gampopa's community and then the communities that his disciples created, most of them are like that. And they are what we would call like meditators, the way you and I tend to think about meditators. So another name for the Kagyu lineage is Nengyu, is not Nengyu, sorry, Drupkyu, which means practice lineage. So not much emphasis on intellectual learning, not much emphasis on ritual, but contemplation, meditation, and done individually. Very little group practice. Now, for sure, among Gampopa's disciples, like all of us, you know, different people had different things that they like. For example, I think based on the evidence, I think like this other great disciple, first Karmapa, Dusung Khenpa, clearly had more interest in ritual. And so in his collected writings, you have more ritual texts. And you also show, like, for example, he would go to other lamas to learn different ritual systems. In contrast, like Pamodrupa didn't have a lot of rituals either. And the next generation, Pamodrupa's disciples, among them, and he had many disciples like his teacher. In fact, they say even more, Pamodrupa. And in his case also, there are many different types of people who came. Some of them clearly had interest in philosophy, and so they were very learned. Some of them were more like him, practice, retreat, and did not encourage a lot of group activities. So there's variety, but overall, there is this tremendous emphasis on two things: solitary practice and discipline. Another way of saying discipline is simplifying. And sometimes we think discipline is so tight, you know. No, it's about simplifying your life. Don't waste time on unnecessary things. Put it down, put it down, put it down. So famously, Pamodrupa, we don't know about Gampopa, but probably influenced by Gampopa. Famously, Pamodrupa has one rule. If you want to join his community, and so there were no dormitories, you know, individuals just build a little cabin or little shack, but actually it's more like a shack because Pamodrupa's rule, which Jiden Sumgön also adopt the same rule, you want to join the community? Okay, good. You have 1 day to build your living place. Yes, with help from others, but 1 day. After 1 day, no more. That's enough. You can just stay in there. Yeah, you could say like ascetic practice. No building of big monasteries, you know, big shrines, all of that. No. Simplify, simplify, simplify. But then the thing is, eventually the Kagyu lineage also started to learn what other people are doing. All the other branches also start to, you know, build big buildings, build, you know, blah, blah, blah. But the basic flavor of Gampopa's tradition is really about contemplation, meditation, and living a life of simplicity. And in terms of contemplation, in terms of that practice, mainly Mahamudra. To those disciples who he could see have the ability to use the techniques of yogic exercises, what's called like truko, and training in tummo, he taught that. It is said that himself, to the end of his life, even as very old already, he always had his meditation belt that he would wear. And so himself, he did those practices, but he didn't necessarily teach everyone that. But then to many others, he did not teach that. He felt they don't need it, or they're not suitable. Then he just teach them other things. Whatever other things he was teaching, it was all about Mahamudra. So much so that later on, much later on, like in the early 20th century, one great Kamakagyur Lama called Gongtu, Jamgon Gongtu, he said that Gampopa taught 3 types of Mahamudra. He said Sutra Mahamudra, Secret Mantra Mahamudra, and Essence Mahamudra. For Sutra Mahamudra, that Mahamudra is the training involves training in shamatha, vipassana, like the regular shamatha and vipassana, then leading into Mahamudra. No deity practice, no manipulating of energy, because all those belong to secret mantra. So no like yogic exercises, truko, tummo. But to those disciples, to some other disciples, he would teach secret mantra Mahamudra, then it would have, deity yoga. Then on the basis of deity yoga, after being firm, then you have the truko and tummo, and what's known as the 6 yogas of Naropa. He would teach that. And again, leading to Mahamudra. And yet, to many others, he didn't seem to either teach the first type or the second type. He taught Essence Mahamudra, which is like directly using words, using simple words, using gesture to point, to introduce people to Mahamudra practice directly. That Jamgon Gongtu in the 20th century, very influential Lama, said that is called Essence Mahamudra. Now, Gampopa himself never used these categories and say, oh, now I'm teaching Sutra Mahamudra. Now I'm teaching Secret Mantra Mahamudra. Now I'm teaching Essence. It's just a much later kind of looking at what he was doing and say, you can generally say he was doing it in 3 different ways. And it's helpful to kind of get an understanding, that was Gampopa's style. So then again, the main point is, what's most important to him is Mahamudra. So if we look at our text here, and where it says completion stage practice, so now we know, here Gampopa is working with the secret mantra framework. Because again, right, the vocabulary of completion stage is secret mantra vocabulary, whereby in deity yoga, there is creation stage and there is completion stage. And then under completion stage, in the generally how secret mantra is taught, or what I think most of you know as Vajrayana, generally how that is taught, especially like the Sakyapas, in Gampopa's time, they were seen as the experts in secret mantra. Yeah, actually, they were known for two things. One, they are known for their scholarship, and very learned. But particularly, they were known for their understanding of tantric theory and practice. And they were greatly learned in the theory. They could explain very clearly, very systematically. So the Sakyapa tradition actually represents that focus. And when completion stage is taught within that system, they divide it into two types. There is the completion stage with characteristics and completion stage without characteristics. Here in this text, Gampopa only talks about completion stage without characteristics, which is closer to his main way, which is Mahamudra. But okay, just to show the contrast, within the Sakyapa system will say real Mahamudra necessarily has both parts, with characteristics and without characteristics. And so they found Gampopa's way as at best simplified, at worst confused. So for them, for the Sakyapas, they say completion stage and Mahamudra is the same thing. But in order to qualify as completion stage and Mahamudra, then it needs to have the yoga with characteristics and the yoga without characteristics. It says Gampopa is only teaching yoga without characteristics. It will not work. So what are the characteristics? It's the practice again of Trukor, Tummo. So these yogic physical exercises and then the cultivating, the manipulating of energy to create this inner heat. The 6 yogas of Naropa, dream yoga, sleep yoga, these types of practices. But Gampopas felt that not everyone is suitable to and needs to do these practices. He the way he taught Mahamudra, he says it's possible to practice Mahamudra purely with shamatha and vipassana, as taught in the paramita system, as the foundation. Then you can go straight into Mahamudra without the support of the yogas of Naropa type of yoga. Now, to be clear, it's not that the Sakyapas are saying everybody qualifies to practice the yogas with characteristics. In fact, they say very few people have the qualities, have the ability to do those practices. So then they should focus on creation stage first. Creation stage needs to be very stable before you do completion stage with characteristics. And when you have sufficient training in creation stage with characteristics, then you can practice creation stage without characteristics. So their complaint about Gampopa's approach is Gampopa sometimes would skip even deity yoga, creation stage, and skip deity yoga completion stage with characteristics and go straight to completion stage without characteristics. They say he just make this jump, and these things are all necessary. according to their understanding. The Sakyapa system, for example, also very much emphasize the need to take monastic vows. And in the completion stage with characteristics, which they say is necessary, but then very few people can do. Yeah. And in that system of practice, there is one part that includes the, how to say, that includes working with sexual desire. And so they say very few people can do that. And the people who can do that needs to have the vows of celibacy. Yes. It's not easy, you know. Some of the great Sakyapa masters, they were not monks. But then people misunderstand and thought, oh, you know, but they are lay people who took celibacy vows. Because of Vajrayana. And some of Gampopa's disciples, he trained in that way, yes. Almost all his great disciples were celibate monks. But he gave them the kind of training that is, you could say, is classical secret mantra approach. But to many of his other disciples, he basically just say, those things are not necessary. They are messy. You are not qualified. Let's just jump over here because it can be done that way. That's the thing. He's saying not everyone needs it. And he's also saying, I didn't make this up. Already in India, many also practice in this way. And this is how you do it. So even with the classical secret mantra way, all the different practices, right, they are still geared towards transforming the mind. That's still the final reason, to clear the mind of the mental defilements. So Gampopa said, for that purpose, we can do it this other way, without manipulating energy. And in any case, he says, you know, most of us, after a certain age, our energy system is too messed up already. If you're 16, there's still hope. But there's, of course, when you're 16, you don't want to practice Dharma. Oh, why am I here? So there may be 2 or 3 around 16-year-old. You have hope still, you know. In a way, you could say, you know, Gampopa's kind of radical, from the Sakyapa perspective, radical approach, yeah, you can see it in the life of the Buddha. He spent 6 years doing all kinds of ascetic practices. They said, you know, manipulating energy, you know, training the mind until it reached this very like mystical state, you know, feeling like you are one with everything, feeling like everything is absolutely empty. He had all this really amazing mystical experiences. But then after all these experiences, whenever he came out of those meditations, suffering is still hanging out. Suffering is still around, confusion is still around, you know. So it said that in the end, out of complete desperation, when he thought he was going to die already, but then he got some nourishing food, and he said a surge of energy came back to him because he was close to death. He was starving himself, mind over matter, all those things. But then finally, one day, just as he was about to give up, he remembered an experience when he was 7, 8 years old, where during a planting festival, his people were mostly farmers. His original, when he was a prince, and they were mostly all farmers, including the king. And so they have, during this planting festival, he kind of, out of all the partying that was going on, he kind of walked away, sat under a tree, and very naturally, his mind settled, his body settled, and then he thought, oh, and now, at the age of 35, after doing 6 years of all these like very intensive practice, he remembered that experience. He said, let me try that. And he did that. And then it is said, from there, things begin to go in the right direction until he achieved full Buddhahood. So what is that? What is going on there? Later, in the Mahamudra, in Gampopa's teachings, he explained, he said, this is what happened. So we'll look at that. Basically, according to the Vajrayana teachings on completion stage with characteristics, and they have a very detailed understanding of the existence, you could say, of three bodies that we all have. There is the physical body. This physical body is maintained through a energetic body. And that energetic body is the body of energy that supports and maintains the physical body. Then that energetic body exists because of the mental, emotional body. So there are these three bodies. In, you could say, non-secret mantra teachings, it mostly deals with the mental body and to some degree the physical body. Because in the end, the most important one is the mental body. So in the general teachings, the non-secret mantra, the paramita system, and even the lesser vehicle system, detailed teachings on the mental body, so to say, body. It's not a body, but you can think of it as a body. And to some degree, there are teachings about the physical body. In the secret mantra, where it's distinctive or unique is its understanding, and therefore, based on that understanding, it's the techniques related to what to do with the energetic body. This knowledge of the energetic body and what to do with it, it's not exclusive to Dharma practice, because it is a body of knowledge that is also shared with the medical traditions, especially of India and of China and Tibet, which combines a lot of the Indian system, Chinese system, and to some degree Greek and Arabic systems. So this understanding of the energetic body. Where the medical tradition, where the direction they take this understanding of the energetic body is they take it to the direction of how it affects the physical body. And so then, as medical doctors, they treat problems of the physical body. The Dharma teachers who are trained in understanding the energetic body, their focus is to take it in how it affects the mental body, because they mostly are interested in where the problem starts, which is on the mental, emotional side. So the teachings and practices of completion stage with characteristics is working with these energy, and you could say manipulating and sometimes forcing the energy, forcing and controlling aspects of this energetic body in order to affect the mind. Specifically, a direct link is seen between energy, like life energy. So life energy, like oxygen, and oxygen travels through blood, right, to all the cells in the body. Here, in this understanding, something more basic than blood carrying oxygen is there is what they call wind. But wind, we're not talking about wind. Wind is a poetic expression for energy, because energy has certain resemblance to wind. So it's called lung. The same word for Tibetan call, oh, today lung is very strong. And they mean, strong winds. And then when they could also say lung is very strong, as in the energy is very strong. And they also could mean lung is very strong, as in, yeah. So 1, 2, 3. Same word, but there are three things. But they are connected, but there are three things. So now here we're talking about the second sense of lung, which is the vital energy that moves. And so when they move, just like blood has a fixed pathway into the rest of our body, being pumped by the heart, right? Then likewise, this vital energy, lung as vital energy, also goes through a system of passages. How this is linked to mind is that mind in its nature is pure. This is already taught in the paramita system. Mind in its nature is pure and pristine in its original form. But when those minds hang out with vital energies, something changes. And minds and vital energies tend to move around together. So first of all, mind is not one thing. Mind are moments of occurrences. So minds in the plural, moments of consciousness. Each moment of consciousness, it says, is linked to a particular movement of vital energy, like a horse and the rider of the horse. The horse is the vital energy. The rider is that moment of consciousness. In the paramita system, the focus is on how this mind, or these minds, although the nature is pristine, but because of basic ignorance, then these minds turn into various types of mental defilements, afflictive emotions. In the secret mantra system, and you could say what they tell you is what the paramita system tells you about this relationship is, you could say, the general principle. What the secret mantra system tells us is further information about how. The paramita system tells us why. Secret mantra explanation of the relationship between the pure mind becoming mental defilements, pure minds becoming mental defilements as a result of hanging out with vital energy. That is the how. Yeah? Why and how. So how, briefly, is that it says that, remember, like there is a whole system of pathways, channels in the energetic body. So it actually analogizes the energetic body with, like you could say, a city. The fancy word is mandala, but it's a city. Yeah? It analogizes it with a city. So in this city, there are three main highways. But these three main highways, from these three main highways, it branches out to 72,000 roads, lanes, to walkways. 72,000. Each instance of vital energy is comparable, you could say, to a car, a vehicle. And inside this car is an instance of mind, a moment of mind. Okay, don't be too literal about this. This is analogical thinking, not like, linear thinking. Feel it more than try to lay it out, Now, furthermore, as long as these vehicles, whether it's bicycle, a car, an SUV, a truck, a skateboard, whatever, as long as they are moving in the 72,000 branching out, and even in the two of the three main highways, the left and the right, as long as they're moving around there, then the passenger is afflicted. Meaning the particular mind is no longer pristine. It has become stained because of pollution. A lot of pollution in the 72,000 roads. The three main highways, left and right, less polluted. The only one where you can travel without being polluted is the main highway that goes to the Plaza de Armas. Goes in and out of the Plaza de Armas. That is the only clean highway. So now, secret mantra completion stage with characteristics gives you methods and techniques to encourage, to entice, to bully, to force all the traffic in the 72 polluted roads into the central road. Because when you're able to do that, then all the moments of minds that turn up, because what they are riding on, those moments of vital energies, have entered the main road, the central channel, then the minds naturally regain their original identity. Then they are now pure, they are now pristine. And that's why you need a completion stage with characteristics, because they force all traffic to go into the main road. And the main road never has traffic jams. No matter how many vehicles enter with how many passengers, because of its basic nature, never traffic jam. Whereas in the 72,000 branching out, it's polluted and it's jammed up. And from the perspective of medical knowledge, disease come from the jamming up of traffic in the 72,000. In the side roads, in the pathways. There are even robbers. Like drive in the wrong neighborhood, finish. Even if you come out alive, your vehicle might be gone. So for example, to cultivate tummo, inner heat, the practice of that. So it's at the base, close to the base of the central channel, generally below the navel, in that space between the navel and the root of the sexual organ, in that vicinity is where this inner heat can be cultivated. You do begin with imagined flame. Using your imagination, place the flame in that area. Then you practice deep breath and controlled breath and control in a certain way. Now, this is where lung as vital energy is connected to lung as wind/oxygen. And then using breath, using imagination, you can begin to experience a warmth building up there in that area. This warmth is very comforting, is very attractive, but not in like an exciting way, but in a very natural way, and it can build and build. This is not just up in the head, as they would say, Of course, it's up in the head, but it also has real world consequence. If you go to YouTube, you can find. You type the right words, you'll see these monks, nuns, yogis, up in the mountains. And one of the things that they do once a year, they are in retreat in the snow mountains. Once a year, they come down to the monastery in the village and they demonstrate the effect of this heat. And so in the coldest night of the year, they all come down wearing just like basically, kind of fancy underwear. And that's all they're wearing. And they sit, then they start this meditation. Then other people take, cotton, and dip in ice cold water and put on their back. to dry. So Tibetan laundry system in the winter, and there's even a competitiveness to it. Yes, human beings are still human beings, although these are very special human beings, because the competition is within the period of time they're doing this, who can dry the most gets first prize. Like some giving a kata, it's like, oh, your tummo is the strongest. Scientists have done some of these study, and they don't know why they can measure uh, things that they said doesn't happen naturally among human beings, which is to raise your body temperature at command. The body kind of burns up. They're like, wait, how? No idea, but they are measuring it. So when this heat gathers there, right? Like I said, it's a very warm, not necessarily temperature, although there are temperature issues. But more importantly, it's very reassuring, very even they use the word like pleasurable bliss, and this is how they connect it with like sexual pleasure. They say it's related. Whereas sexual pleasure leads to more craving, uh, this kind of pleasure uh, is different. But they share a common kind of quality. Yeah? But there are also important differences. So, in this way, monks can remain celibate if they can master this technique. Because okay, well, mostly adults here. Yeah. I mean, biologically, we are sexual beings, right? But then this method allows you to do something with that. And some of us have stronger and not so strong. So that's why Gampopa said, well, if you have a particular problem in that, you have the ability, I'll teach you how to rely on this heat and not the other heat. So Gampopa says it's optional. The others say, no, 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 it's not optional. Because as long as these vital energies are not coming. So then what is the purpose of having the heat gather there? It's the equivalent of someone announcing there is free tacos on that road. So then all the traffic will come there. So to practice tummo is the energetic equivalent of free tacos on the main road to the Plaza de Armas. So then all the traffic will go, let's get there soon, and trick them into entering the central channel. And as more traffic comes to central channel, it's said that that flame becomes even stronger and stronger. Then even more tacos are offered. More news about free tacos go out, then more of the energy would go in. And that's why, according to secret mantra, you have to do these practices in order to entice traffic to go into the main road. Then all the different mental defilements traveling on all the different vehicles, right? Which is the analogy there. They all come to the central channel because there is free tacos there, right? And then especially they say like desire. Then of course the strongest desire, like sexual desire. And they say actually even if you have a lot of that, no problem now, because they can go into the central channel. Like, there is free tacos. But of course, when you get there, turns out, it's vegetarian tacos, even vegan. But too late. You are in the central, you cannot leave now. Yes. Your desire for all the other types of tacos also will naturally disappear. And so it's like a trick. Get it to go there, to get all your energies to go to the central channel. You're like, what? Only aguacate? Yes. Okay, how does Gampopa explain
¿Cómo lo explica Gampopa?
that this free taco is not necessary? Or rather, what is Gampopa's equivalent of free tacos if he was not offering free tacos? He says devotion. Instead of manipulating energy, he says devotion. Devotion is a way less messy, way more powerful way to attract all the winds and the energies to go into the central channel. And for Gampopa, devotion has many layers. Devotion to the three jewels, devotion to the guru. And finally, the key one is devotion to the possibility, the real possibility of being Buddha. The more you open your heart to that, then all the traffic will go into the central channel naturally. That's why he says these other ways very helpful for those who need it, for those who have the ability to do it, or even for those who have some real problems with that, need the energy to go somewhere. You can use those. But he says, there are challenges and also problems if you use that way. But the way of devotion, he says, no side effect. And you don't have to imagine or wait until, oh, yes, one of these days when I become a monk or nun. This understanding you can apply right now. If there's one way you can simplify, you take that one, then you already experience the freedom that comes from taking one of those vows, and 2 and 3 and 4. So don't do it with the attitude of control, but do it with the attitude of letting go. Letting go of complications. Actually, it takes a lot of energy, complications. But we have become addicted to drama and forgot, how life could be so different, with less drama. So that is the essence of these vows that the Buddha gave, that the Buddha recommended to us. It's not to make life more difficult for you, but it's to make life lighter, easier. Okay, now addiction for coffee and cookies are calling. Free coffee. So all traffic is going that way now.